Hello and welcome to How to Go Independent. This is your host, Sean Kernan. Today I'm going to do a solo show talking about something fairly basic that I haven't really covered in an episode so far. I'm going to talk about the things you have to set up an independent practice. So the title of the podcast is How to Go Independent, but this will be more about just what are the things you need to have thought through to establish your own practice. And I'm talking more in the first 90 days or so versus the ongoing maintenance. So if you're working in an employee model or in a situation where you don't feel like you have enough control of your destiny, or you'd like more flexibility in owning the practice, or whose goals you're chasing, that sort of thing, here are the things I think you need to think about, mostly in order to set up your own practice. So without further ado, we'll get into them and go from there. I'll also touch on a few things that I don't think you need day one or even the first few months. Step one, or the first item I believe you need, is the mindset and the belief that going independent is the right thing to do for you and your clients, and that you can do it. So this is sort of the psychology of how you feel about independence. If you've been in the industry a long time and, 20, 30 years ago, people that set up their own business, their own practice were the lower producers in your mind, or if you still have that belief, that mindset, you need to really examine that and figure out where it's coming from and, figure out if it's still accurate. I would obviously argue it's not very relevant or accurate if it ever was. It certainly isn't today. But you need to have the mindset that, one, you can do it. Two, it's the right thing to do. And really have that kind of belief system. So the mindset is a big part of this, that you'll be able to overcome whatever fears and obstacles come up, because there are a lot, and that's why I started the website and the podcast. And I've seen a lot of people go through that cycle, and I've enjoyed going through it myself and coming on the other side, and also seeing other people wonder what took them so long once they've made the jump. And so that mindset is sort of getting your head right. Number two is very related, but I made it its own item. I call it commitment. So to be ready to make the move, once you've kind of got your mind accepting the fact that it's possible and advantageous for your clients and for you, then you have to have the commitment to prepare, plan, do the work necessary to make it successful. I have worked with some people and talked to others who have made a move, but they haven't really gone full force. They didn't have the commitment it required to establish the business as a viable entity. I think it's a mistake, or maybe it's just people not really caring enough if it's successful. But I've seen people make a move but not really go all out, not do the things they should have done to be ready. And some of that is due to ignorance at times, and others times I think it's just due to overconfidence or lack of commitment to treat this like a new business, because it is. Certainly if you have existing clients, it's a lot easier than starting from scratch. But mindset-wise, both times I've moved, one to a wirehouse and once to independence, I have treated it like it was a brand new thing, like I was starting from scratch. Because guess what? On the first day you resign from your current firm and get re-registered at the new firm, you have exactly 0 clients. You pull up that, in our system, it's a pie chart. It's a big 0. So that's a little scary, but you have to have the commitment to build that quickly and efficiently. So, those are two very related items. One is the mindset and the belief system. Number 2 is the commitment to get it done. And then number 3 starts to get into the actual tactics and work to be done. And I categorize this number 3 as plan. You have to have a plan. So that includes, the items on this list, making sure you've thought through how you're going to address each of those items that I'll talk about. The story or explanation you give your clients when you let them know you've made this change. All the other administrative items that are very important in the first 90 days, what kinds of accounts you're going to use, if you're going to change your business model at all, how do you communicate that, and have you explored all the different options? But broadly speaking, you have to have a plan. And that plan can be as detailed as it needs to be, especially on the operations and administrative side. But you have to have a plan on how you're going to accomplish this. What is the timeline? How are you going to explain to clients? How are you going to, get things ready and, get through that first, few months, 3 to 6 months, whatever the time frame is where transition takes up a lot of your time. Certainly by 6 months, it should start to slow down, but the first 60 to 90 days is usually a whirlwind. So you want to have as much of the what ifs thought through as you can. So that's number 3. Number 4, you need to have help. And that's, again, a very broad item. I would put under this item staff. Do you have existing staff you're going to bring with you? Are you hiring new staff members? Do you have shared resources you're going to use at the new broker-dealer or custodian? What kind of help will you have from an internal staffing or shared contract staffing basis? Help might and should also include either your broker-dealer or your custodian, since they benefit when you benefit in terms of moving your clients and setting up accounts. They don't make money until you do, so there should be some resources available from the custodians, salespeople, and operational teams, or the broker-dealers recruiting and onboarding folks, or if you're affiliated with a large RIA or hybrid OSJ, some of those people and organizations should have some resources for you to rely on and guide you through a lot of this process that I'm describing. And then another aspect of help might be if you have business partners, if you have particular vendors or wholesalers you work closely with, if you have other centers of influence who need to help, reiterate your plan or your stance on why you've changed firms to your clients or why you set up your own practice. Anybody that has a shared interest and you can trust to be on your side, I would put that in the help category. So you need to have help. You can't do this by yourself. You're going to have your own business, your own practice, but you're going to need help establishing it. And you obviously need help maintaining it. But again, this episode is mainly about establishing the practice. Now we'll start to get into more of the day-to-day stuff that I think is critical. And I'll preface this by saying I don't think a lot of things are critical, at least the first few months. You want to make sure that you don't miss things that will slow your ability to move clients over and to get going and doing business immediately. But I'm going to focus on the things that I think are absolute have to have for every advisor. The first one is pretty simple. This is number 5 on our list of what we need to go independent to make a move. Number 5 is you got to have a phone. So I don't know that needs to be stated, but I'm going to say it anyways. It doesn't have to be fancy, either a landline phone system and or if you can use your cell phone temporarily. I know advisors that run the bulk of their business via their cell phone. I personally like having a VoIP, a landline capability. I use Google Voice, as I've talked about in other episodes, to route my calls. But you need to have the phone system operational, know how to use it, make sure the calls that come in get to you. So I think this is why a lot of people opt for their cell phones, because it's the most simple and direct option. A lot of clients probably already have that number. You know how to use it, hopefully, voicemail, email, web browsing, whatever else communicating you need to do. A solid smartphone is a mission critical item at this point, but you also need to make sure whatever phone you use as your main office system, even if that's a lightweight voice over IP or VoIP, make sure it's all set up, you know how to use it, because you want to be able to communicate easily with your clients, especially those first few weeks where you're probably going to be on the phone quite a bit when you're not in front of people face to face. Next item, another obvious one, but I'll talk about it anyways. Number 6 is you need a computer. You can decide if you want a desktop or a laptop. There's benefits and drawbacks to each. I won't go into that in detail. In this forum, I might do another episode at some point on all the technology decisions that there are to make and some of the pros and cons of each. I tend to be pretty frugal, especially when I started the practice almost 7 years ago now. I didn't spend much. I just got kind of what I needed to do business. The way technology moves, I would try to get something that's not the basics like I did at the beginning, and go maybe 2 rungs up from there, even if you're fairly frugal, just to future-proof your business a little bit. As I record this in the middle of 2016, I bought a laptop 6 months ago or so, and my conclusion was I needed at least, and this is a Windows laptop because I have to have Windows to run our system, unfortunately, but I needed at least an i5 processor or chip, whatever the computer lingo is. I need that kind of processor to do, the amount of web browsing I want to do and have a bunch of tabs open. So it wouldn't take a lot of effort to find an expert, even at a retail store like a Best Buy, and just say, hey, here's what I need to do. What kind of machine do you recommend? And there's no reason for most of us, if you're buying a laptop, you should need to spend, or a desktop, but certainly with a laptop, you shouldn't have to spend more than $1,000 to get a solid laptop. Now, if you want to have higher powered graphics, and really that's only if you're using video or doing a lot of video games for some reason, would you need a higher end machine. But again, that's personal preference. I guess I just would be cautious if you go to the low end. Be careful you don't pick the lowest end machine, because that can slow you down. And again, as one who likes to be frugal, especially when I started the practice, out of caution, served me well, but I've definitely benefited from upgrading the last few years. So number 6 is a computer. The 7th thing that I think you have to have is a place to work. So keep in mind, I did not say an office. As you may have heard on the podcast, I've had people that work remotely from home and meet with clients, wherever is the most convenient for clients. And I've come across and talked to enough advisors that work from home that I don't think it's a requirement to have a successful business to have an office. Now, that said, there are some perception benefits, if nothing else, to having your own space. Again, that might be its own episode, the pros and cons of working remotely versus working in an office, even if it's just you. So if you have your own office, you want to make sure that is all ready to go. Deal with the little details that are necessary to get that set up. Ties back to number 5, the phone system. Make sure that's working correctly. If you're going to have a desktop computer, number 6 in my list, make sure that's up and ready to go. A lot of these things, it might feel like you have a million things to deal with as a business owner. But keep in mind, these are all startup investments of time. These aren't the kinds of things you typically are going to spend your time on a day-to-day basis. I think there's this fear of, oh my gosh, I'm going to spend all my time trying to fix my computer, or taking out the trash, or fixing the phone system when it doesn't work. And certainly those things happen. There's changes, but this is a crush of activity because you're going into this with nothing. At least I'm assuming that. So you need a place to work. If that's an office, again, it's pretty straightforward. Make sure everything's functional. Make sure it looks the way you want. For when a client comes in, what do they see? What's their experience? If it's from a home office, also important. Make sure that's well established, well defined. If you have family members that are there during the work hours that you're going to be working, make sure they're aware of what you're doing and why and how. Try to figure out how you're going to use the space together if you're in the same house or parts of a house. But a home office setup is not difficult to establish, but you want to make sure everything's in place. Check your technology. Again, especially if you're changing things from an internet infrastructure or adding phone lines, or make sure everything's operational before you pull the plug and resign from your old firm. This is, again, basic stuff, but I want to cover it because the last thing you need to be doing is messing around with technology issues the first few weeks or months that you're trying to reach out to your clients and establish the foundation of your practice from a revenue standpoint. And from a place to work standpoint, still on number 7, you also need to know, where is stuff going to get mailed. So for most people, that's going to be one and the same location, but you want to make sure that's on file with your custodian or broker dealer, any fund companies or annuity companies you do direct business with. Make sure everyone has that information. If you're going to use a P.O. box, for example, if you have a home office, make sure that's ready to go. Test out, mail yourself something, make sure everything flows the way you think it should. But just generally think through all the things that will happen in your practice. That's what I did to create this list. And, having a place to meet people is another part of that. If you work from home, where are you going to hold client meetings? There are options out there these days where you can, work from home and keep your fixed cost basically zero for real estate, but then meet people on an as needed, and pay for a nice office conference room on a per use basis. And that might be more efficient depending on how many meetings you have and what kind of impression you're trying to create. So maybe you talk about efficiency as one of your your values, so that you work from home because you can keep on top of your work that way. But for meetings, you have a very professional, polished conference room because you want to show your professionalism when you're meeting with people and not be distracted by other things, or not having to go to their office or home or have to meet over lunch. It's sometimes nice to have a place to meet that you have access to. And again, the economics might work well enough where it's just as cheap or cheaper to do that and have a very nice client experience, but not spend the money on a desk that you may not want to sit at if it's in an office that you don't enjoy going to. And then last, but also first, number 8 on the list, and I've put it last on purpose because the other things have to be in place before you pull the trigger. And number 8, to have your own practice, to go independent, you need to have clients. So really this is number 1, because without clients, the rest of this is pointless. And I've seen people that have spent a lot of time on number 1 through 7 and messed up number 8. And it, frankly, it just didn't work. They were out of business, out of the industry within a few years, or doing a completely different thing than having their own independent practice. So, if you've done the homework to be prepared, you've got the mindset and belief system down, you've made the commitment, you've put together your plan, you've found the right help, and then you've figured out the mechanics of the right phone and computer and place to work. I think the clients, if you've done the work you need to be doing over the years to service the folks you work with and develop those relationships, the clients will come along. A lot of the mindset belief stuff, part of that is just telling people you're confident that this is the right thing. So I've established my own practice. Here's why. Love you to, join us, or I'd love to keep working with you. If you say it the right way, it won't sound overconfident, but it certainly won't sound like you're begging for the business like tends to happen to newer advisors who, will take anybody, and we sometimes come across a little bit desperate when we're new. At least some of us do. I think I did at times. Or eager is the right word. Maybe not desperate, but very eager. So clients, I think, for our best clients and the majority of the revenue that our practices generate, they work with us, not with a particular brand name. And again, I think that's well established. Certainly there are benefits to some major firm names in some clients' minds, but by and large, if you have done a good job for your clients, have good relationships, they will go where you are. So number 8, make sure you have clients. It's hard to fix years of neglect or not servicing people or not developing relationships. But if you've done that and you've got a solid foundation of relationships, the clients will realize, most of them, that they need to stick with you and you'll get them through the change, and everyone can live happily ever after. You'll take care of what they need, and therefore they will take care of you. So there you have it. There's my list of 8 things that I think are absolutely critical before you make a move to independence. And again, you might hear in here that several of these things indicate you're not all by yourself. You're not as I said in, I think, a blog post recently, you're not starting a new country. This is not developing a constitution and going to war with the oppressing king. This is setting up your own little piece of the world, but there's lots of people out there that would love to help you. And, where the best place for you depends on a lot of things, what you want, what you need, the size and character of your practice. But these 8 things, I think, are the kind of the critical things that you need to have in place before you pull the trigger on a move. And then I'll touch on a few of the things I didn't mention and why. One thing I don't think you have to have on the day you make this change is some sort of accounting or bookkeeping plan or complex system. Now, it is helpful to have a separate account for all your business expenses. So at a minimum, it's very helpful to have your own bank account, or a separate bank account for business expenses, even if it's a personal bank account. As long as you can show a clear segregation that these are business expenses and these are not. When you take a client out to lunch, you can use your other checking account or debit card or credit card. The main point is to keep them separate and distinct so that's easy to show if and when the IRS asks, or more importantly, in the short run, when you start to do your first tax return as a self-employed advisor. So the reason I don't think it's critical from day one is because you can always go back and, pull the history to do the necessary reporting. And that's assuming you set up a separate bank account where it's easy, or credit card. So that one step is important, but it's not something you absolutely have to do before day one. I like QuickBooks Online. I know a lot of existing CPAs would prefer the QuickBooks non-online version, sort of the desktop version. But either way, find a good bookkeeper or CPA if you don't have one. But it doesn't have to be done day 0 or day 60. I think you can kick that down the road a few months, again, depending on what time of the tax year you're making this move. I'm recording this in June of 2016. So if someone was to make a move right now, they're going to have a good 8-9 months before there's really any hard impact of what they're doing tax-wise the first few months. So again, that's partially personal preference. I would want to focus on making sure clients come over. It's what I always recommend to people. But if it's going to bother you, certainly get on top of it earlier. But I guess I would just say there's time to get that squared away if you don't have it perfect from the get-go. One other thing that other people might say you should have is some sort of legal entity, like an LLC, a limited liability corporation. I don't think that's necessary day one, because most of the liability we're going to take on is covered by, or a lot of it, by E&O insurance. So if we have a typo on a trade and put too many or too few shares in, there could be a cost to that trade when it's updated, but typically those costs are very reasonable. I have heard of cases where you have large trade errors and that could cause a problem, but those are not the liability protection that an LLC provides is not going to do much good in that situation. It's not going to absolve you from a trading error. So I think, at least in the short run, especially, you can definitely do business as a sole proprietorship, which in essence is what you're doing if you don't have an entity. So if you want to get an LLC set up and you have enough time beforehand, that's great. Go ahead and go for it. But I would say, wait 90 days and see how things go. Then figure out how you're going to address your legal structure and get good advice from attorneys and, business professionals that you respect. And then I don't think you have to have any kind of hard and fast marketing or growth plan. I know a lot of people that are going to go independent or set up their own practice or move firms at all. They want that to supercharge their growth, and that's fine and exciting. And if you want to, I'd say go for it. It's your practice. But I would just make sure people realize you don't have to have that. One of the great things about an independent firm is if you're doing half what you did last year, but it still pays your bills, no one's really going to bother you. And that's, you don't have to pretend to have some goal to triple your business in 18 months to make a move. So that kind of thing, again, can be dealt with afterwards, just like the bookkeeping and accounting, and the entity formation. So those are a few things that I don't think are critical. I'm sure there are others that aren't critical, and maybe some are others that you might think are critical. If you have any questions or concerns or think I missed something, feel free to email me at sean@indfa.com. Hope this list was helpful. Again, it's a very basic checklist in some ways. If you're already independent, it probably was a bit simplistic. But if you're looking at making the change, I want to really break down the key highlights and show you there's just not that much to it. It's a lot of work to make sure you're ready to take on your clients and learn a new system. But it's not easy, but it's fairly simple. So that's all for today, and look forward to seeing you next time.